I never thought I'd be the villain in my own family's story. But here I am, sitting in the dim corner of a cheap coffee shop, nursing a latte that's as bitter as my mood, while my father's face flashes in my mind like some damn horror movie poster. The man who built a journalism empire, who claimed to believe in truth above all, just kicked me out of the family business. Why? Because I refused to sell my integrity for a pocketful of dirty cash. Let me rewind a little. For years, I lived under the enormous shadow of my father's reputation. The Harper Tribune was his kingdom, an old-school, no-nonsense newspaper with a legacy dating back to the 1920s. Everyone respected the name Harper. Everyone, except me, apparently. When I graduated with honors in journalism, I was sure my father would be proud. After all, I had the degree, the passion, and the stubborn streak that ran in the family. I joined the Tribune with big dreams and a hunger to keep the paper honest, to hold power accountable. It was supposed to be my legacy, too. But the Harper Tribune had secrets, darker than anyone cared to admit. A few months into my job, I stumbled onto an uncomfortable truth. Some of the top brass were taking bribes. Corporate favors, hush money, you name it. It wasn't just some rogue editor. It was systemic. The stories we printed weren't about truth anymore. They were about who paid the highest price. One evening, my editor, who was shaking in his boots, slipped me a thick envelope. "Don't open it here," he whispered, "but you should see this." Inside, I found a contract. It was a bribe offer from a powerful lobbyist, asking the Tribune to bury a scandal involving a multi-billion-dollar corporation. The price was obscene, but what shocked me more was my father's signature at the bottom. I confronted him the next day. "Dad, how can you sell out everything we stand for?" I demanded, voice shaking between anger and disbelief. He smiled that cold, practiced smile. "Sweetheart, journalism isn't charity, it's business, and business is about survival." I told him I wouldn't be a part of it, not for all the Harper millions in the world. He warned me to keep quiet, or face consequences. I thought he was bluffing. 2 weeks later, I was called into a board meeting. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by stoic men in tailored suits. "We've decided it's best if you pursue your career elsewhere," he said, voice dripping with false concern. "Your ideals don't align with the Tribune's future." I didn't get a chance to defend myself. The next morning, my desk was gone, my email access revoked, my phone calls ignored. My family disowned me, at least in business terms. So here I am, jobless, betrayed by my own blood, and scrambling to figure out my next move. The woman who believed in truth was now a pariah in the world she loved. But you know what? I'm not done. Not by a long shot. If my father thinks he can bury me with his greed and dirty deals, he's about to find out that the Harper legacy isn't just his to control. I may have lost the Tribune today, but the war is just beginning. Because some truths are worth fighting for, even if it means taking down your own father to prove it. Losing my place at the Harper Tribune wasn't just a professional slap in the face. It was a full-on betrayal served cold by the man who was supposed to be my mentor. But instead of breaking me, it lit a fire I never knew was smoldering underneath. I spent the first few days after my exile pacing my tiny apartment, scrolling through every email, every file I'd saved. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. No way. My father had built his empire on half-truths and backroom deals, and I was about to expose every rotten corner of it. The first thing I needed was allies, journalists who still believed in truth, no matter how much it hurt the bottom line. People my father had already tried to silence. I made some discreet calls, mostly to contacts I'd made over the years, those who knew the Harper Tribune wasn't the pristine institution it pretended to be. To my surprise, many were willing to talk. They just needed proof. And that's when I remembered the contract, the bribe signed in my father's own handwriting. That was my golden ticket. With the help of an old friend who owed me a favor, I secured a private server outside of my father's reach. I uploaded every scrap of evidence, emails, contracts, payment slips, and internal memos. Each document was a nail in the coffin of the Harper Tribune's honesty. But this wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was personal. My father had used his power to silence me, to erase me from the family narrative. He'd turned his back on his own daughter for a few extra dollars in dirty deals. I started piecing together a story, a real story, not the sanitized press releases or carefully crafted headlines the Tribune churned out. This was raw, unfiltered truth, the kind that would shake up Washington and Wall Street alike. Of course, I knew going public wasn't without risks. My father wasn't just some small-town newspaper owner. He had connections, lawyers ready to sue, PR teams to discredit me, and worst of all, my own family's name to drag through the mud. But I was ready for that. I hired a lawyer who specialized in whistleblowers, someone who looked like he'd wrestle a bear and win. We devised a plan to leak the information anonymously at first, building pressure before going full throttle. Meanwhile, my father was probably sitting in his glass office, sipping expensive whiskey, convinced his empire was untouchable. If only he knew I was playing a different game now. The hardest part was watching my mother, the only person in that family who ever showed me genuine kindness, struggle to stay neutral. She called me once, voice trembling, warning me to back off for the sake of family. But family, I reminded her gently, didn't shove a knife in your back and expect you to smile. Days turned into weeks, and the leaks started. A few stories surfaced online, hinting at the bribery scandal. At first, the Harper Tribune dismissed them as baseless rumors. But as more evidence emerged, the cracks began to show. Advertisers started pulling out. Stock prices wavered. My father's empire was beginning to crumble, one headline at a time. Yet, I wasn't satisfied with just ruining his business. That was only step one. I needed him to feel the same betrayal I felt. The loss of control, the shattering of his carefully curated image. I wanted his trusted allies to turn their backs, his closest friends to question their loyalty. I wanted him isolated, powerless, stripped of his throne. I knew how to do it. See, the Harper Tribune wasn't just about journalism. It was about influence. And my father's most prized possession was a secret, a hidden financial web, linking him to offshore accounts and shell companies, a maze he'd constructed to launder money and hide bribes. I found it buried deep in the files I managed to rescue before my exile. It was risky, the kind of dirt that could put me in danger if I wasn't careful. But now, armed with the right contacts, I was ready to bring that secret into the light. Every night, I pieced together the puzzle. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a reckoning. The question wasn't if I'd get my revenge. It was how far I was willing to go to take down a man who once called me daughter and threw me out like garbage when I refused to play along. Spoiler alert, I'm going to enjoy every minute of it. By the time my father realized I was no longer the obedient daughter, but the storm tearing through his empire, it was already too late. The Harper Tribune, once the unshakable pillar of our family legacy, was unraveling faster than he could buy silence. I watched him from the sidelines as the boardroom battles turned brutal. His allies disappeared like rats off a sinking ship. The man who once ruled with an iron fist now scrambled to salvage a reputation that was as fractured as his family ties. The leaks had become a media frenzy. The hidden offshore accounts, the money laundering, the hush payments, it was all out, in the open now. The IRS and SEC launched investigations, and lawsuits piled up like autumn leaves in a storm. But here's the real kicker. I didn't just leak the documents anonymously. No, I made sure everyone knew who was behind the downfall. The final blow came during the Tribune's annual shareholders' meeting. I showed up unannounced, dressed sharp and ready. My presence alone caused a stir. Cameras flashed. My father's face drained of color as murmurs rippled through the room. I took the podium and laid it all out. No theatrics, just cold, hard facts. I told the shareholders how their trustworthy leader had been selling stories to the highest bidder, betraying the very principles he preached. I revealed the offshore accounts, the fake invoices, the paper trails that led straight to him. The room went silent, then erupted into chaos. Calls for his resignation echoed louder than any applause. He tried to defend himself, but his words sounded hollow, like a man drowning grasping at straws. When the board voted, it was unanimous. My father was removed as CEO on the spot. His empire, my family's empire, was finally mine to burn down or rebuild. But here's the thing about vengeance. It's not just about destruction. It's about justice, and sometimes a little satisfaction. I didn't want the Tribune to die. I wanted it reborn. So, with the board's reluctant blessing, I stepped in as interim CEO. The same family that kicked me out now had to answer to me. The first order of business was cleaning house. Every corrupt executive, every compromised editor was shown the door. Transparency became our new mantra. I invited investigative journalists back into the fold, promising to restore the Tribune's honor.